Some way, somehow, we're already sitting in July. It honestly seems like just yesterday, Max and I started doing these YouTube shows, but happy July 1st, guys. I know it's a long weekend coming up, so hope you guys have a great one. But that also means, Max, that football season is right around the corner. It's about 3 weeks from Tuesday, July, I think it's 6th, that the Bears are going to be reporting to training camp. So that's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on, which means that from now until basically next June, we're going to be nonstop here at Fireside Bears. You guys know your host, Usayd and Maxx Smith. You can follow us on Twitter at Usayd and at Maxx Smith ESM. Listen, shoot Fireside Bears a follow on Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Check out our weekly show, which we record on Tuesday nights, drop on Wednesday mornings. But what's up, Max?
I'm doing all right. Like you said, it's a new month. It's the first of the month. We're excited here. Things are starting to speed up. We're only a few weeks away from seeing some training camp action, and we're only a month and 13 days away from seeing Justin Fields in preseason action. Not that I'm counting.
You're definitely counting. And I think it's 2 months from, I believe it's Saturday. Yeah, 2 months from Monday, July 12th, we're going to see the Bears open up the season against the LA Rams on Sunday Night Football. So more than anything, man, I mean, it's really approaching quickly here, but let's just break it down. Besides, there's not really been any new news in the sports world besides the NFL's opt-out deadline being on July 2nd. I believe it's 3 or 4 p.m. Eastern time. And Max, that's big because that means a certain quarterback up in Green Bay may or may not be playing football in 2021.
Yeah, that's a huge storyline. And what we've been hearing from several reporters close to the Green Bay Packers organization is that that's a very likely possibility that Aaron Rodgers doesn't report. He opts out. And if that happens, you have to think about Davante Adams potentially looking to maybe do the same. There's been some crazy rumors flying around with him being connected to names in Denver. Who knows what's going on there? Not going to speculate what happens to Davante Adams, but you have to admit the fact that we've heard radio silence from Aaron Rodgers and the opt-out date is tomorrow indicates a very high probability and possibility that Aaron Rodgers won't be playing in a Packers uniform next year or for the rest of his career.
Yeah, Davante Adams is interesting because I was actually working about 12 hours yesterday, and on one of my breaks, I saw a tweet. I don't even want to say it's a tweet. It was just a report, and pretty much what the report mentioned was that the option of possibly reuniting with his old college quarterback, Derek Carr, and playing for the Raiders, it is something that's not off the table. Now, to be clear for our listeners, that's not me saying that Davante Adams is on his way out anytime soon. It's just that's an interesting comment right there, especially considering it's not the first time this offseason that Davante Adams has made comments about what his future in Green Bay could be like. And just talking about Aaron Rodgers, I mean, after that NFC Championship game loss to the Buccaneers, he made the comment, he's just like, oh yeah, a lot of guys' futures are uncertain. That includes me. And one of the names that obviously left Green Bay this offseason that was really a staple alongside Aaron Rodgers was the center Corey Linsley. I mean, he signs in Green Bay. And at the time, everyone just kind of shrugged off the Aaron Rodgers comment. They're like, oh, it's not a big deal. He's locked into whatever it is, a multi-year contract. No one's going to say anything. It's just Aaron saying that there are certain players that aren't going to be back because that's what happens every year. And lo and behold, when he makes that comment, about 3 months later on draft day, April 29th, what happens is, aka Justin Fields Day, by the way, here in Chicago, what happens is the report comes out that Rodgers doesn't want to be back. And it's certainly going to be interesting to monitor because Aaron already missed mandatory minicamp, and now usually it's around this time of year where you can start projecting what the NFC North is going to look like, what a lot of divisions are going to look like. And clearly what's going on here is if Aaron's not back, this is a completely different, here's the thing. Whether or not Rodgers is back, this is going to be a completely different divisional race.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and again, we're at this point of the offseason, like you said, where things are pretty dead. We're waiting for content. Some people are making some rumors. You have to take everything you see right now with a grain of salt. So again, we're not saying that this is official because we don't know that. And obviously would be a little biased as a Bears YouTube channel. But one thing I do want to point out, and that there really isn't a lot of attention around, is, yeah, Aaron Rodgers made a lot of comments, and a lot of the narrative in the media was LaFleur not trusting Rodgers to put the ball in the end zone, to send out his kicking team and take the 3 easy points. That's not just a sign of distrust in Aaron Rodgers, but a sign of distrust in the entire offense. That's an insult to everybody that lines up on that side of the field. Because yes, Aaron Rodgers is the QB, he's the leader of that team. Of course, he's the superstar, he's the MVP. Everybody is looking at him for the media because it's really easy. But if you're any position player on the offensive side of the ball for the Green Bay Packers, and your head coach doesn't trust you to put the ball in the end zone, which you've done time and time and time again in the regular season, probably the best team in the regular season everyone's talking about, and I would agree, that's got to shake your confidence as an offensive starter. That's got to make you really question whether or not that's the organization you want to be with. And of course, that's when I saw the Jerry Krause comparison for us Chicago fans, that Aaron Rodgers was in the group chat saying it's Jerry Krause. It's not just Rodgers. It's an entire locker room thing at that point. It's not just him upset. We know it's the entire organizational aspect is that there's something wrong with the culture. So I don't blame anybody for wanting to get out. I really don't. And we saw Jordan Love taking QB1 snaps in minicamp. And I'm fairly confident we're going to be seeing it here as training camp rolls along and we get into the preseason. So things are not looking good for the Green Bay Packers. They do have a bunch of talent. They're still a very talented team. Do not get me wrong, but there are some question marks on the offensive side of the ball. And that is an interesting position to be in if you're a Green Bay Packers fan. And you're right, the divisional out race or outcome with Aaron Rodgers' career in question is completely different, because you can no longer look at the Packers as that locked in first seed for the NFC North every year, because one of the best, if not, the second to the first, in my opinion, he's the best quarterback in the league, is gone. He's not there. So what do you do?
Yeah, it's weird because if you go back and you look at just traditionally some of the Packers front office, and it's actually what I'm pulling up right now just so I can have the dates and stuff be totally accurate for you guys. Now, Brett Favre was in Green Bay from 1992 to 2007. Yeah. And what's interesting is there's a lot of big name guys like Andrew Brandt of Sports Illustrated that I follow on Twitter. And Andrew was actually in the VP of the Packers from 99 to 2008. And Brett Favre was there from 92 to 07. That means Andrew effectively saw the Brett Favre era. Yep. And one of the things that Andrew tweeted was basically, hey, it does not matter that Aaron Rodgers isn't at mandatory minicamp, because you know what? All those years that Brett Favre was here, Brett wasn't there. And effectively all it did was allow Green Bay to get an idea of where it was basically an evaluation period for Aaron Rodgers. And you could say, okay, it's the same thing here because the general manager, Gutekunst, did overlap for 3 years with Andrew Brandt, because Gutekunst was a scout in 05 when the Packers drafted Aaron Rodgers. So Gutekunst has seen this movie many times, at least once before. All right. And so looking at this now, I mean, I mentioned earlier Aaron's missed minicamp, mandatory minicamp. If he's not at training camp, that's when you know things are going to get serious. And there's a serious timeline that I think we need to keep in mind here. And I'm going to reference Khalil Mack here because Khalil Mack didn't show up to Raiders camp in 2018. And then all of a sudden, you know what? August goes by, still not showing up. And then the 2018 regular season starts the second Sunday of September. Right after Labor Day weekend, we see Khalil Mack get traded. And so I'm not saying anything for sure is going to happen. But I think if an Aaron Rodgers trade is in the works, or something could possibly happen, I'm going to say it's going to be that last week of August, first week of September. So anywhere from August 29th, to September 4th or 5th, because the regular season does kick off on Thursday, September 9th. And those dates are critical because at that point, you're a team that's finalizing your 53-man roster. You're getting the roster together. And if that final 53 doesn't include Aaron Rodgers, then you're the GM, Brian Gutekunst. You don't want to be known as the guy who effectively pushed Aaron Rodgers out of Green Bay. But again, you kind of will always be known as that guy because you selected your own guy in Jordan Love. And I also think that here, Matt LaFleur, the head coach, is also partly to blame because I know, and I'm just speculating here, but it just seems like Matt for sure had a say in the pick of Jordan Love. I mean, over here as Bears fans, we love all the drama and turmoil that's going on in Green Bay because after 3 decades of just getting beaten, bludgeoned by the Packers, we're never going to be the type of people that say, well, now it's your turn, but we will be those types of people when it comes to the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to be it's really easy for Bears fans to be in denial, right? Like I'm not that in denial Bears fan where I completely acknowledge the talent. They won a Super Bowl. But that's always my retort is, you've had two of the greatest quarterbacks of all time on your roster and you've only won one Super Bowl each with them. Like we want to talk about wasting quarterback potential. Why does Brett Favre only have one ring? And why does Aaron Rodgers only have one ring? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and according to our friends at Fireside Giants, Alex and Anthony, they will bring that statistic backed up and be like, oh, well, this is why Eli Manning's got 2 rings, so he should be in the Hall of Fame.
And it's true. I completely agree. But outside of that, just because, Aaron Rodgers deserves at least 2 rings. He's just that good. And Brett Favre, whether you like him or not as a person, really, really led the way with the gunslinger, big arm movement. So he also deserves. And he had some mobility as well. So, I mean, he really was Aaron Rodgers, the foundation for Aaron Rodgers to run with that style of play. But anyways, outside of talking about other teams, let's focus in on the Bears. We have a lot to talk about in regards to the cornerback, defensive back position here. A lot of question marks going around for what really was a pretty solid position over the past 2 years for the Chicago Bears defense. Though Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy made it a real special priority to improve the offensive side of the ball. We had to let Kyle Fuller go because of salary cap restrictions. It was a really painful cut. Unfortunately, it had to happen really looking at, just the money side of sports. But that leaves us with a little questions at depth at the cornerback position. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a problem when your 2 most experienced cornerbacks are Desmond Trufant and Artie Burns, but I think there's a lot of versatility in this room. And the last time defensive coordinator Sean Desai spoke to the media, he talked about how the Bears have a lot of options at cornerback, and I'll play the clip in just a moment here, but that really sticks out to me because Desai is a guy that, again, he was a secondaries coach. He was a safeties coach last year, so he's seen the secondary basically be overhauled from the very beginning.
Kindle showed that he belongs in this league last year in the reps that he took last year, so I think he's going to have a chance to compete at various positions. And the good thing about the way we are teaching philosophies, we try to make sure guys know multiple spots. That helps us on game day with the depth, and that's been a philosophy of mine and our defensive staff since the beginning. So we're going to have a lot of competition at the nickel as well. We've had guys that have played there in games, in terms of Duke, and even a DHC has played in games. Eddie Jackson has played in games at that position, and I'm not saying he's going to play there, but we've had enough competition at those positions that we've got enough depth where we'll be able to solve that problem. It's a good problem to have because when it's an open competition, I think you get the best out of all the players on your roster.
So that was a lot to unpack there by Sean Desai. And what sticks out to me is he automatically praised your guy, Kindle Vilder. And now let me just run down the list of cornerbacks. I mean, you have Artie Burns. Yeah, there are. You have Artie Burns, Xavier Crawford, Rojesterman Ferris, Thomas Graham Jr., Jalen Johnson, Michael Joseph, Trey Roberson, Deontay Ruffin, Duke Shelley, Desmond Trufant, Kindle Vilder, and Tease Tabor. But man, this is a really interesting group because I think number one, you have Jalen Johnson's going to be your presumptive number 1 guy. I think you're hoping for a bit of a bounce back season from Desmond Trufant, who only started 6 games last year. But again, people forget that Trufant as well as Artie Burns, both guys are first round picks. Now, both guys did struggle with injuries last year. And then you have your options because the Bears didn't just cut Kyle Fuller this offseason. They also cut Buster Screen. So really your competition in the nickel's wide open. And I think that someone like 2019 6th round pick Duke Shelley could be an option to start there, possibly even Vilder. I think the hidden gem that's going to emerge is Thomas Graham Jr. These guys like Ruffin, Joseph, Tease Tabor, Xavier Crawford, Rojesterman Ferris. These guys are all just like competition pieces at best.
Yeah. So what I think is really interesting about this group of names is I wrote an article about this because I'm really interested in seeing how Desai schemes our secondary moving forward, because this group of guys, this group of corners, is very much man oriented. And he said in that clip that he's teaching them for every position. And that's a great philosophy to have when you don't have a bunch of depth, because none of these are really star power names outside of now Jalen Johnson, who had a fantastic rookie year. But a lot of these guys are primary man coverage corners, which is maybe the direction that this defense is going in, specifically if they want to scheme around some of the talents of their players. Artie Burns, for example, was a lockdown man defender, and he struggled in Pittsburgh with heavy zone schemes. He was brought in for man, and then they started scheming towards zone, and he complained. There are several articles written about it, how he wanted to go back to the man schemes, and he really struggled in zone. So, okay, we have Artie Burns there. Jalen Johnson excelled at man coverage this season, but had a little bit of difficulties in the zone. Thomas Graham Jr. can play both, but he excelled in man as well, rather than zone. Desmond Trufant, on the other hand, more of a zone scheme guy, had a ton of success in Atlanta in the zone scheme. Last year he was at Detroit, which runs a heavy man, and he didn't do well there. And then Kendall Vilder, like you said, my guy, love this guy, ton of upside, ton of potential. He struggled at man as well, but really found his step at zone. So Desai has an interesting situation on his hand where it seems like there's an old guard and a new guard of cornerbacks. The younger guys are a little more oriented towards man coverage, which is what the league is moving towards, by the way. It's becoming more and more popular for leagues to have more man sets. And we still have some solid zone backs, but teaching them as much as they can is important. And I remember reading a report that said Kendall is really working on his man coverage this offseason, which I've seen some clips with him with some D-back footwork coaches. He's looking really great on the line. He's practicing his man coverage and pressing ability on the line, which is great. He struggled there last season. But yeah, I mean, you see versatility on this list. I see a lack of depth. I'm kind of upset with the lack of talent that Ryan Pace brought in at this position over the offseason. And I don't really want to hear the excuse that, oh, well, we didn't have enough cap space, because honestly, none of the good names on this list really went for that much money outside of one or two. I mean, I'm talking Desmond King III, I'm talking Malcolm Butler, even Brashad Breeland and Xavier Rhodes. None of them signed a contract over $4 million. But we brought in Desmond Trufant for a 1-year, $1 million deal, and we're not even sure how much playing time he's going to see. Yeah, it's a good veteran addition to add to your developing core of young corners, which is solid in this roster. We do have some solid young corners. Thomas Graham Jr., another addition to that. But if you're really looking for that voice, for that veteran leadership, specifically in the cornerback room, we have a solid cast of safeties, which is great. And Desai alluded to that. He mentioned DeAndre Houston-Carson. They're going to rely on some of those safeties a lot more this year, I feel, because we don't have that depth of talent at the corner position. Now, ask me a year later, we might see some storylines develop. We might see Kendall Vilder take the next step. We might see Jalen Johnson become a lockdown island corner, which is what we desperately need. Because remember, Kyle Fuller is a textbook zone corner. He created a zone island, and quarterbacks were afraid to throw towards the zone because he would jump the route because he was just smarter than you. We don't have that anymore. Now he's over at that ridiculous core of cornerbacks that Vic Fangio has put together. He put like the dream team, a secondary unit. So that'll be something to watch for sure. If you're looking for a game and the Broncos are on, look for the secondary schemes. They're probably going to get a ton of picks this year. But yeah, I'm really interested in what Desai is going to whip up with the zone or the man scheme. Him saying that he's really interested in teaching everybody different positions is important because of the lack of depth. But I guess that does add to what you see as versatility. Is they're training him to be Swiss Army knives, which is not a bad thing. But you lack depth when you're doing that because you're not allowing these corners to specialize in what they're good at. So moving on, we'll see. I don't think it's a terrible idea to rely on Travis Gibson or Eddie Jackson this year. In fact, I think they're going to have improved years because the defense is relying on them more. And I think if you let Eddie Jackson run, he won't disappoint you. So yeah, there's a lot to ask questions. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, the depth here is certainly concerning. And the reason being is because you effectively, what you're saying is hey, outside of Johnson and then Desmond Trufant as well as Artie Burns, you're basically going to rely on players like Vilder, Thomas Graham Jr., and Duke Shelley to make up for a lack of depth. And again, I do believe that Vilder and Shelley are going to be on the opening week roster simply because they've been here. So there is that familiarity aspect. Now, the only way to adjust this depth and significantly change the outlook of this group is by bringing in Steven Nelson. Now, if someone gets cut towards the first week of the preseason, or I'm sorry, the first week of the regular season, then you go ahead and then you say, you know what, let's go and make this move. But Jalen Johnson's interesting because I believe that he led all rookies in terms of pass breakups last season. He had 15, so he was right up there. But I also find Johnson interesting because his entire career last year, he was pretty much playing as cornerback 2, which is traditionally the left side of the screen anyway, if you're watching it from a broadcast angle. And then all of a sudden, when he spoke to media before minicamp, he was basically like, look, I don't care about where they put me. I just want to be wherever the ball is. And I think that also feeds into what Sean was mentioning when he talked about his versatility.
No, it don't make no difference to me. I just want to be where the ball is at, and just being able to make plays and impact the defense the best way I can. So I mean, I don't really care or mind which side that's on.
So pretty much, man, what I'm getting from what Jalen Johnson's saying is he doesn't care where he's at. He just wants to be where the ball is. And I think that Johnson's playmaking ability really showed off last year.
Yeah, he had a fantastic rookie year. He was in the early conversation for defensive rookie of the year. He was really putting the league on notice. Another great product out of Utah. They've produced a good amount of cornerback talent out of the past couple of years, so they're definitely just improving their resume. Definitely going to be looking at them as a potential feeder for future cornerback development. Maybe you see their DBs coach get recruited to the NFL here pretty soon. But what I think is interesting is we don't really have a solid nickel. And Desai said that. He said, we're really kind of struggling, or not struggling, but they're really searching for that full-time nickelback, and we're not going to find that for a while. Some argue that Duke Shelley should be that full term, and he does have some potential to be that. But we don't really know who that is at the moment. After releasing Buster Screen, there's a lot of questions that we still need answered. So I'm interested. If you're watching, let me know who you think will be the nickelback. And then Usayd, what are you thinking right now? Who's your top pick for the nickelback?
Honestly, I think a lot of it depends on who's cornerback 2. So let's just say Kendall Builder's cornerback 2. Then you're looking at nickel being someone like a Duke Shelley possibly. You could make a case for Thomas Graham Jr., even Artie Burns playing there. But then if that doesn't happen and Desmond Trufant's cornerback 2, then it's going to be very clear to me that that Kendall Builder would be in the slot.
Yeah, I think Vilder at the slot isn't a terrible thing. Ideally, we'd like to see him improve his man game before he lines up there. He's fast. He has quick feet, so he has the potential to be a solid lockdown man corner. But also, his last season, his primary ability was in the run game. He really wasn't that flashy in pass defense, but man, he was good at stopping the run. So I'm interested in seeing, because some of these other names on this list are talented run stoppers on this defensive secondary. So regardless of what happens, I'm pretty confident in our run defense. Yes, we have to talk about our interior defensive linemen and where's Eddie Goldman, but from the secondary run defense, things are looking pretty good. But what worries me is pause right now if you're watching this. Take a look at our schedule if you don't have it memorized. And then I want you to look at some of the quarterbacks who we're playing against this year. Just take a look. Take a look at some of those names. And then remember all these questions we have about our secondary. The league is past first these days, and we're playing against some of the best quarterbacks in the league, if not one of the selection of the hardest schedule of the year, because we're playing the best quarterbacks in the league. If we don't have a solid pass defense by the time we're at week 5, this season is seriously going to be in jeopardy, because we're just playing against the best talent at the passing game in the league. So we as fans really have to be careful, and we have to really look out for how our secondary is responding, how they're reacting, how this new unit is playing. Because remember, with the first-year coordinator, we're also looking at a lot of players who are entering these positions for the first year as well. So there's some positives there that they get to grow with each other. They get to learn each other's strengths more. But the negatives are, again, really easy to pick them apart because they don't have that identity yet, and they don't have that experience yet. So I'm not saying that any criticism is unjustified. In fact, I'm right there with you. I'm genuinely concerned if there's one piece, but here's the thing, long story short, the one thing we know for certain is 2022 cornerback is going to be a top priority for the Chicago Bears front office. So already calling it now, regardless of what happens this year, they're going to be looking at that position either early in the draft or towards the free agency if they can. So look at the cornerback big board right now. If you like draft prospects, start ranking your names and look for your guy for the Bears to draft, because they're not going to wait until the 6th round this year or 2022. They're going to look as early as they can to grab a corner. I'm already feeling it.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, and keep this in mind. The Bears don't even have a first-round pick in 2022, so at earliest you could open up the season with your cornerback 1 and 2 being 2 second-round picks and Jalen Johnson and whoever it is. But also, that's a great point to bring up, because I think, yes, next year is a pretty decent year for cornerback class based on some of the research I've done. But also, if someone like Kendall Vilder pans out, and I know I've spoken very highly of Vilder because there's a lot of untapped potential there, then you don't have to worry about cornerback. But also, you are going to have to talk about the depth that is going to need to be replaced next year. And just looking at this entire room in general, I mean, it's not that there was necessarily a lack of depth, or it's not that there's all of a sudden this major lack of depth that no one saw coming. I think we all saw it coming, but Bears fans just got so used to getting Kyle Fuller playing at such a high level that almost masked a lot of the other issues that no one was really willing to talk about.
Yeah. When we lost Prince Amukamara, we brought in Buster Screen. The defense already took a step back there. So we were really blessed to see Prince and Kyle Fuller played some of the best years of their career together. And then we're looking at Eddie Jackson's freshman year, and he's just absolutely destroying it. That was a fantastic defense. And we got used to that. And now we're here where our defense is still formidable, but it's not as solid as it once was just a few years ago. Now, that's not Chuck Pagano's fault. That's just purely from a talent perspective, is we lost a lot of talent at the secondary over the past couple of years, but Kyle Fuller has always been that kind of rock. Now, we brought in Jalen Johnson in the second round to solve questions and in anticipation of us losing talent at the secondary. But I don't think we encountered that we would lose as much talent as we did in just a short amount of time, or that we would lose Buster Screen as well. So, but obviously there must be some confidence and trust in Kendall Vilder for them to not really target any cornerbacks in the free agent market. I know we brought in Brashad Breeland. I know we most likely offered him a contract, but we probably undersold him compared to what the Vikings offered. Or maybe we didn't offer him a contract at all and we just let him walk after meeting. So regardless of what happens here in the season, just keep an eye out on the cornerback position. Keep an eye out on the safeties, because this is an important part. You know, we're talking about cornerbacks, but we can also talk about safeties. Keep an eye on Eddie Jackson. This, whether you like it or not, this is going to be a make it or break it year for Eddie Jackson, because he didn't perform as well as he did last year. He had a pretty bad year last year. Now, Hay says that it's because of the schemes, and he also had a couple touchdowns, but were unjustly ruled back, in my opinion. Some really bad flags this year. But he says that he's really not given the opportunity to play. And he's already been stated as saying that he really enjoys Sean Desai, and he's really enjoying it. He sees a lot of Fangio in this scheme, which should make us happy, and it makes Eddie Jackson happy. But what if Eddie doesn't perform this year? What do you think is going to happen?
Honestly, if Eddie doesn't perform this year, that's really bad, because I know that he's one of those guys where they can't necessarily even get out of his contract, because he is one of them that's locked in until 2024, I believe. And that's not something, obviously you never hope that happens, but, so his current contract runs through 2024. And let's just say they were to cut him in 2022. There's a couple things to keep in mind. One, he's got an $11 million that gets $11 million gets guaranteed on March 20th for like injury. Okay. But they can't move on from him next year. So theoretically, what you're looking at is, at best, the Bears would have to hope and just hold on to Eddie Jackson until 2023, where they could cut him post June 1st for $13.1 million. But really, man, when you look at it, I mean, the Bears structured this Eddie Jackson contract in such a way where they're ready to go into the next couple of years with him as the starting safety. And you have to mention this as well. I mean, he's got a relatively low cap hit this year. He's only making about $5 million, whereas between 2022 and 2024 is where he's making the majority of the money.
Yeah, there's a bit of a head scratcher there because he's also 29 right now. So by the time this contract's over, he'll be 32. Not that we're being ageist here, but when we're thinking about age at this position, there could be some question marks about how hard hitting or how quick he's going to be able to stay up with some of these younger wide receiving talents as the league just continues to get faster. So yeah, I mean his cap hit after 2022 is $17 million if we decide to cut him, which is a pretty chunk of change. Hopefully we wouldn't have to do that. Ideally, we'd like him to perform, but even looking into 2024, by the time he's 32, this contract cap hit will be $18 million if we decide to cut him instead of just let him ride out his contract. At that point, you're already starting to think draft a new safety. Probably by 2023, draft a new safety. Maybe even 2022, draft a new safety. Travis Gibson Jr., he's not going to be here forever. He's going to be here for probably another year or so. So, yeah, there's just a lot of question marks at this position. But I think having Sean Desai is fantastic because he does have that experience with the cornerbacks. With the safeties. And then, of course, with secondary scheming, with the secondary master, Vic Fangio. So if there's anyone that's going to lead this team, lead us out of this conundrum and quandary that we're in, some big words, it's going to be him. And I think that this is honestly some good head coaching experience for him because I don't see him staying as our DC forever. He's head coach material in my opinion. So we'll just see. We'll see what happens. Again, a lot of this is speculation. That's what we do. That's what the entire industry is. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. If we're right. But what you have to really acknowledge is there's a lot of questions going on.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions going around, which is why, again, what happens at this quarterback position, one thing that we can't speculate on is it is going to impact the Bears 2022 offseason. But hey, listen, that's going to do it for us. You can follow us on Twitter at MaxSmithESM and at Usayd Koshul. Follow Fireside Bears guys on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Check out our weekly show. We'll be back. Have a great 4th of July weekend. And then we'll be back next week with some new shows and more content for you guys. But until then, guys, good morning, good evening, and good night. And always bear down.